Today I'm doing a wire drive on this Spyker C8 Laviolette. This is one of the weirdest and rarest cars I've ever got to interview, and we're going to find out why the owner purchased this car. He actually bought it from Missy Elliott, who had this car since new. I don't know why, and I want to find out why on earth he bought it and why she bought it. Thankfully, he purchased it directly from her mother, so he knows all of the answers to my questions. And in this video, we're going to go over the details, some of the weird features in this car, and take it for a ride. Do you have any plans for the next 10 years? So right here, we're with Ed again. Do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Ed Bolian from VinWiki, and this is my 2009 Spyker C8 Laviolette.
So why did you buy this car?
I think it is the most distinctive car. It has all the presence of any hypercar. It's more rare than most hypercars, and it's actually a lovely car to drive. It uses a very simple Audi 4.2 liter V8 with all the Dutch craftsmanship we could ever want. There's about 200 of them in the world, 60 or so of these Laviolette style coupes, and less than 30 in the United States. This is the only one in Georgia, and I actually worked at Lamborghini Atlanta Motor Cars of Georgia, which was a Spyker dealer. They were done selling cars in the US when I started late in 2009, but I just always thought they were the most interesting cars with so many features, so many characteristics that you wouldn't find on anything else.
And you bought it from Missy Elliott, right?
I sure did, and she actually has wonderful taste in cars. As she had this, she had several Aventadors, a 599 GTO, a Gallardo Spider, every kind of Rolls Royce, some really, really great stuff. But when I bought it from her, she hadn't seen the car in several years, and she didn't know why it wouldn't start, didn't know how many miles it had, and I was not able to inspect the car. So that tends to be the recipe for some good, shrewd negotiation, because nobody else is going to bid a car in that circumstance. But I knew it was a nice car. I had no idea it was this nice, and so I didn't pay nice car money for it, but I have loved it. I bought it with about 2,000 miles. It's got just shy of 5,000 on it now, and it is wonderful.
So why on earth did she buy it though? Like, do you know? Did she tell you anything?
She didn't. I mean, she has that kind of sort of weird, rare car taste, and I think this satisfies and checks all those boxes. The nature of the way that the aircraft materials or the design of the car certainly fits. A lot of people call these poor man Paganis, which is a moniker I am entirely comfortable with. And when you think about centerlock wheels, a pushrod suspension, a roof scoop, louvered fenders, clamshell designs, exposed gear linkage, the propeller steering wheel, the turned aluminum, the aircraft switches, nothing else gives you this kind of presence, this kind of experience, and it's awesome to drive. It uses the 4.2 liter Audi V8, similar enough to the R8 or the RS4, but really mostly the A8 design, 400 horsepower, early cars with timing belts, these later cars with timing chains, makes a wonderful noise. It is still an Audi transmission, but they've adapted it, and especially when it comes to the linkage. It is notchy, but it's a really, really cool shift feel, and it's one of those things that just, again, nobody's ever seen these cars because they are so rare. And, you know, when they were new, they were selling them opposite a Gallardo or a Ferrari 430, and it was a tough value sell there because you can't sell on rarity when they're still building them new. And that's why nobody bought them, like most rare cars, but now they are so much more appreciated. It fits in on any concours lawn alongside the most seven-figure or more hypercars, but to me, it is just as special as you could want it to be.
Can you tell me a little bit about Spyker, the company? Like, who are they? Where did they go? What's their story?
So they made cars in the very early 1900s. They actually participated in the 1907 Peking to Paris race. And those cars are very much legendary. But then they started building planes for World War I and developed quite the reputation there. And they came back in the 2000s with a prototype that had been developed in the late 90s, and it became this, the C8. They developed an aileron before they went out of business, and then they did go out of business, then they bought Saab, and then went out of business again. And so it's a very interesting corporate journey for Spyker, but that's what makes the cars so much fun.
And is it true that there's rumors of them coming back?
That is going to happen. Unfortunately, there's a guy that goes by Spyker Enthusiast Jasper who has sort of taken it upon himself to maintain all of the cars. He's touched more of them than anybody else, and he makes the parts we can't find elsewhere, makes sure everything's available, makes sure everything can be fixed, and honestly, it makes the cars very, very easy to own. So he is now involved with Victor Mueller in restarting the Spyker brand. They're going to make more of them. And I am so excited to see what they do, kind of filling in some of the missing cars and then deciding what the next chapter will be for the brand we love.
So when you say they're going to make more of the C8 Laviolettes or other models?
There are some unfinished chassis that they're going to try to finish, and they're going to build them kind of as, you know, more one-off sort of ideas, and then hopefully start to fill in more of a production run, maybe do some more ailerons, and even design the next car.
So it didn't really scare you buying a car this rare for finding parts and maintenance and servicing?
It's always scary, and it is one of the things that can sometimes allow you to get a better deal on a car. And I love it when everybody else is afraid of it, because I can then buy it, drive it, prove that it's okay, show how you can take care of it. And even just one person doing that and documenting it online can cause the values to go in the direction we prefer.
And you seem to like to try and buy cars and then make the values go up and then sell them, right? That's how you build.
You know, I was always fascinated by the economics of supercar ownership, because I did not come from the ability to do so. I knew the only way I'd be able to do it is by hacking my way through the financing arrangements and figuring out where the value curves were going to go. And certainly cars like this fit that mold really, really well. And so it's not that there's a specific recipe or only one way to do it, but a lot of things about this car, it being special, it being rare, it becoming more appreciated, of the right age, starts to make the arithmetic work where you can have higher confidence in owning something that might have been a little bit too crazy.
What's this car like to drive?
It is very analog and very cool. You know, now we've got the propeller steering wheel on it, which was not available on the US cars. You had to have the Gallardo steering wheel with the driver's side airbag. They did get a waiver for the passenger side airbag, but that makes it a lot more interesting because the lower diameter gives you a lot less feel as though you might have power steering. They use an electric helper power steering, but strictly speaking, the car does not have it. You got floor hinge pedals, no ABS, no traction control, very rudimentary, but infotainment and stuff, nobody needs that junk. Missy Elliott did actually put a radio in it because she wanted to be able to listen to music, so it is in there. Most cars do not have radios, but I just think it's so much fun, so nice. Let's take it for a drive.
Do you mind, before we take it for a drive, does it have any luggage space? Can you show me?
Sure, yeah. Very small, in fact, but not nothing. So to get into the car, you press the button on the back of the mirrors.
Wow.
And you use this latch to open the luggage space.
Oh, it's back here.
And they did have a €100,000 option of a Louis Vuitton custom luggage set that only one customer ever ordered. And so it was one of the most expensive options ever available on a car. But yeah, you get a little bit of space there. Not too much, pack light.
But that's all you get, though. The front has nothing in there.
No, it doesn't. The front is a very clamshell design that gives you a lot of interesting view and access into the way that the car's suspension works.
You have to shut the doors to open it?
No, it does clear, despite looking like it won't.
So what's the build quality like on this car? Is it quite good, or is it sort of like a, you know, low production run brand?
It is actually quite good. Now, there are two sort of segments of Spyker production. The first 69 cars were built by a company called Coventry Prototypes, CPP. And those cars are a little bit more hand-built, a little bit more bespoke. You couldn't take the door off one and put it on the other. Then the later cars were built by Karmann. So this is a Karmann-built car. And those are the wide-body cars. They're a little bit distinctive in terms of the way the headlights look and things like that. And those are probably a little higher quality.
Oh, yeah, you really see it. It's kind of like an F40.
It is, yeah. So you see the push-rod suspension, you see the steering rack, you see all the cooling, all the ducting, all the things.
I just realized your wiper is from a 190E, I'm pretty sure. That looks the exact same as my car.
There are a lot of parts sourced, including the tail lights and things like that are from a Diablo, which was also from a bus. And it's, you know, that's fun when you look at, you know, low volume hand-built cars that they had to find the stuff somewhere.
Well, there you go, Ed. If you ever need a wiper, now you know. It's from a Mercedes, I'm pretty sure.
I don't drive it in a lot of rain, not because it's I mind it getting dirty, but because it's not the most watertight car.
Oh, okay. So we are in the Spyker now, and this interior is so cool.
Thank you.
It's just polished aluminum everywhere.
It is turned aluminum, polished aluminum, you know, no plastic anywhere.
What do you think driving this car? Does it feel more special than the Bugatti or the Murcielago?
In many ways, yes, because, you know, the craftsmanship was an entirely different approach than the Italian or the British brands. Obviously, the Dutch have their craziness, but I think this is the perfect representation of what they can bring to an equation like this. There's just no place like the cockpit of a Spyker.
Have you ever driven a car you think has a crazier interior?
I don't think so. I think it feels like an old airplane. It feels like a modern supercar. Somehow, it just makes sense.
Now, the looks of the Spyker are quite divisive. Some people hate it, some people love it, and I think that's constantly touching the values of them. What do you think of how it looks?
I think it's unique, but I love it. I mean, when people who don't know anything about cars walk into my garage, this gets all of the attention. More than the Mercedes, more than the Diablo, more than the Bugatti, anything, because it's just so weird and so interesting. Lots of amazing kind of features in movies and things of that nature, and I just think it's a wonderful, wonderful car.
Now, finding replacement parts, have you had to source anything?
I have a good handful of things, and fortunately in all cases, Jasper, Spyker Enthusiast, has been able to. Literally the only thing they haven't made yet, and they're going to make a run of them I think later this year, is these roof glass panels. I've got a little bit of a crack here, which is not uncommon from chassis flex. A lot of the cars have them, and so that'll be the only thing left to replace, and it'll be pretty much perfect.
So when you drive this car on the street, does it get a lot of reactions? People know what it is, ever?
It is. A good friend of mine had one for years before I got this one, and he had the license plate, "What is that?" Because that's what everybody says. Nobody knows what it is. They know it's weird, they know it's interesting, they know they want to know about it, but that's all they can ask is, what is that?
Have you ever had anybody who knows what it is?
Oh, for sure. Like, is that a Spyker? And which is super, super fun because, again, when you have a car that is so unexpected that they're not going to see anywhere else, that's what allows you to really, have that experience of bonding with a fellow enthusiast that understands what they're seeing and just wants to know more.
So do you plan to keep this car for a long time? Is this one that is going to stay in your collection?
It's one of those cars that you certainly can't replace. It's certainly not at its value for the presence and the experience of having it. But, I don't drive it all that much. It's one of those cars that you can be very content just to look at. So it's not the first thing I reach for when I grab something out of the key box. But every time I drive it, I'm reminded of just how special it is.
And it's still quick.
Very much so, yeah. It makes good power, 0 to 60 in the low 4s, goes 187 miles an hour, supposedly. I have not experimented with that, but it is quick. It makes an amazing noise, which is kind of surprising because none of the Audis make a noise this good with the same engine, and so I enjoy it so much.
Now, theoretically, could you take this to an Audi dealership to get anything done?
Absolutely. And fortunately, because there's no extra electronics or things that don't make any sense, it is a very simple example of that technology in practice. And so everything's easy to reach, everything's easy to see, it's easy to diagnose. There's not really that much to go wrong, which again is super unique in cars of this magnitude. And so that's one of the things that I think makes it so lovely that, you're going to park it next to a LaFerrari, but it's probably got 5% of the technology that a LaFerrari has.
Do your kids and your family love this car, or do they have another favorite?
They do love it, and every time we take it out, it just feels super special. The kids like the big red Bugatti and stuff like that, but when you really think about it, this is the one you want to take to dinner.
So if you had to sell this or the Bugatti, which one's going first?
This one probably goes first simply because I do put more miles on the Bugatti. I mean, I've had it now for 4 years, and I do love every chance I get to drive it. But, because it is so perfect, it's honestly too nice for me. I didn't mean to buy a nice car, but I happen to in this case. I do sometimes feel guilty miling it up, but it doesn't really keep me from doing it.
I mean, that's what it was built for.
Exactly. Yes.
Drive. Another few questions, more about life.
Okay, great.
So I asked you yesterday if you're happy and content with where you're at. Do you have any plans for the next 10 years?
I think that as content creators that are a decade or so into it, a lot of us are experiencing kind of a different part of the life cycle of an automotive channel or something like that. And I'm aware of that. And we do see some level of decline in audience share. And that can prompt you to try to reinvent the wheel, come up with a new strategy, or do something wildly different. You know, to me though, I think it's more important to make sure that we stay true to what VinWiki's always been about, for chasing crazy cars, immortalizing legendary stories, and highlighting people that wouldn't normally have the audience or exposure that we can give them when they show up to tell a story. And so as long as I can keep having fun, going on adventures like this, putting miles on cars like this, I couldn't be any happier. And the fact that we get to meet amazing people, network within this hobby that we love, and continue to just celebrate life like this, it's just, nothing's better.
So for those that don't know, how do you make most of your income? What's the kind of split between cars and other sources?
Sure, so, about half the money is from the platform revenue on Facebook and YouTube primarily, and then we do brand deals with great supporters, and most of them are very endemic, meaning it's in the automotive space. So our sponsors are much more like Premier Financial Services or Auto Tempest or the Ticket Clinic or, Lemon Squad, things like that really do fit into the nature of transacting automobiles. And so I enjoy that an awful lot. But the chance to also go out, do event appearances, host events, judge at Concours, and yeah, I flip a lot of cars, probably 5 or 6 a year, and that can be a great supplement to the income, but more so, to be honest, it's just built up the equity that you see in my garage, and that is not an uncommon thing to see of a long-term car content creator, is that most of the money you keep is in the drawer full of titles in your desk. And so fortunately that has been a big part of it, and that is an amazing blessing out of it that I certainly never expected to have a collection like this.
So do you have any advice for somebody that wants to dream of owning a car like this right now?
Like I said earlier, I have always been fascinated by the economic side of it, by how do people own these cars, how do they buy them, how do they finance them, and what does that mean in terms of access? Because I didn't come from the ability or the exposure of the idea of how one might be able to afford a car like this or buy a car like this. So I had to learn how the banks work, how the loans work, how the equity would work, how the value might traject. And that is the only reason that I've been able to do it. So I can't just go out and buy a new Revuelto or a new 812 or something like that, because that's just not possible if you can't stomach a $50,000, $100,000 or $200,000 downside. But I realized that if I tried to look like I won the lottery 10 years ago, that it really wasn't that hard to manage my equity, build it up over time, translate it into the next car, and it's worked out really, really well about 75 cars later. And so that has been a huge lesson learned that has translated to great value and a lot of great experiences and a lot of fun. But it's one of those things that anybody can learn. Just go out, focus on the cars that you really care about, understand how their values behave, build up your credit, engage with the right banks, and you'll probably end up where you want to be.
Well, thank you, Ed. I appreciate you having me out today. If you want to subscribe, you already know VinWiki, and if you want to be in one of these videos, the link is in the description. You can submit your car and apply, and maybe I'll come and do a wire drive with you. Never ever quit your dreams, and remember, God loves you.